a lot of people are up in arms as it's emerged that YouTube's restricted mode, which is kind of like a parental filter for YouTube, it turns out that it's censoring, or at least not showing, a whole bunch of LGBT content, as well as a lot of other content that isn't necessarily kid-unfriendly, but which deals with mature concepts or politics or things like that. There's a few oddities in people who are being filtered out, or content that's being filtered out. In some cases, whole channels are being filtered out rather than individual videos, even though they produce a mix of content, some of which is child-friendly and some of which isn't. But this is mostly blown up around LGBT content, which is obviously concerning to a lot of people because there's a lot of young LGBT people on the lookout for a community, for people to support them, to learn things about who and what they are, and so it seems counterproductive and unuseful to cut them off from that. Of course, the other point of view from a lot of people is that such things aren't appropriate, or that there are certain topics to do with LGBT issues that they would rather deal with their children themselves, or that there's whole concepts, particularly around transgender issues, that they don't think are particularly appropriate to bring up with young children. Now, it's tempting to, given the people who are making this kind of fuss about this issue, who have shown no concern previously for censorship, it's tempting to just give them the finger and say, you didn't care about us when we were being censored and downgraded and not showing up in search functions and not being shown in referred videos and so on, so go fuck yourself, this is the world that you made. But hopefully we're better than that, and we care that our enemies, not that they particularly are our enemies when it comes to content, only in terms of when it comes to their censorship. Hopefully we're big enough to say, okay, this is wrong, this needs work, YouTube, sort it the fuck out. That would be lovely. Of course, there are some issues around this. I mean, there are specific LGBT-oriented kids shows on YouTube that are legitimately terrifying and horrible. I mean, you look at queer kids stuff, or Ollie and Pop, or Pop and Ollie, whichever way around it is, and they are legitimately almost as terrifying as 1970s children's TV in the UK. That shit's legit terrifying and can scar kids, and having a bear or a living balloon try to insist that you're queer seems to me to be just as potentially scarring. However, when push comes to shove and when I'm not taking the piss, I don't think it's right that these things are being filtered, and hopefully YouTube will improve their algorithms and make sure that people that are okay to be seen by kids or whatever can be seen by kids or whatever. The other problem that's going on with YouTube at the moment is that a whole bunch of companies have actually threatened to boycott and pull out, or have boycotted and pulled out from doing advertising on YouTube. So there's going to be a whole raft of additional changes going on. So to give advertisers more control about who or what they can be seen next to, in essence, this whole argument seems stupid to me. These same companies are perfectly willing to have adverts after the news, after current affairs programs that deal with difficult topics and so on. So refusing to be alongside controversial content on YouTube makes no fucking sense to me whatsoever. But it's somewhat hopeful here in that the approach this time, rather than making videos advertiser unfriendly, appears to be to give the advertisers more control over what kind of content exactly their adverts will appear alongside. That seems like a better solution. I don't particularly have any issue with that, because some advertisers, if I was advertising on YouTube, I'd be one of them, are perfectly happy to be alongside more adult content, more political content, more difficult content in general, or don't care either way. So giving them more control, that seems like a good idea. I'm not particularly against these age restriction things, this filtered version of YouTube either, because it's opt-in, so it doesn't really hurt anybody in that sense, and it's not being forced on anybody. The big problem here is that the algorithms don't seem to work very well in selecting content and that's really about it. I guess YouTube didn't communicate these changes to people as usual, and that's a big issue too. Fap-worthy Aryan pin-up, Tomi Lahren, whose profile has been boosted by appearing on things like The Daily Show and so on lately, has apparently been suspended from her job at The Blaze after going off message when she appeared on The View. She is apparently pro-choice. That shouldn't be a controversial thing, but because she's a conservative and because she appears on conservative media, that's apparently enough to get her suspended, perhaps fired. The messaging on that seems a little bit off. Look, right-wingers, you have been complaining a great deal about censorship, and despite me being very, very left-wing, I am with you on that. That is a cause in which we can be united and in which we can fight together against the regressive left or the evangelical authoritarian right. In either instance, I'm on your side so long as you're fighting for free expression. Whoever you are, I don't care if you're literally Hitler. If you say I want to be free to speak my mind, as long as you're not directly calling for violence, so long as the harm principle is not met, I am hunky-dory with that. And you've been pushing that message a lot. You've been pushing it really hard that the right is now the group, the party, the entity that is pro-free speech. And then you pull shit like this. Okay? Free speech is for everyone. No matter their views. You're either for it or you're not. Outside of a few edge cases and things where we can probably agree that there's justification. There's harm, so we can justify controlling it. What the fuck are you doing in this case? It just completely undermines this message you've been pushing that you're pro-free speech. If you then crack down on one of your own commentators for going slightly off message and having a more libertarian than traditional right point of view when it comes to abortion. It's hypocritical, it's nonsensical, and it takes you way off the ground that you've been trying to occupy. So cut it the fuck out, basically. This problem has been rearing its head as the kind of traditional right, the Reaganite right, has been reasserting itself. It did so when it came to Miley Yiannopoulos, and now it's happening with Tomi Lauren. Who knows who else it's been happening with? I don't pay a huge amount of attention to the right, but this came across my radar. So I'm sure there's been other incidents. Stop it. And finally, Mass Effect Andromeda has been coming in for a great deal of stick over its facial animations, bad writing,
I'm trans,
and a whole host of other problems that it appears to be having. And a lot of these criticisms have been directed at social justice-y types who've been working for BioWare.
I'm trans.
The lovely, lovely anti-white racist chap and the you can get raped in GTA woman. Obviously, it was going to come in for flack on those scores, and some of these people's concerns appear to be being borne out if what we're hearing is true, that you can't even play a white character in the game, and some of the dialogue options seem particularly on the nose, shall we say.
Did I mention I'm trans yet?
On top of that, you've got all the animation and other issues that people are having. None of this is serious enough for me not to play the game, because I like the Mass Effect universe, and I'm curious how their interpretation of the Aftermath and where the stories could go next compares to what I did for the Aftermath and so on. I wrote a set of modified tabletop rules to play the Mass Effect universe and had a whole idea of what would happen next, and I'm curious to see how they're going to approach that and the new galaxy and everything. I'm probably going to be disappointed, but I'm going to give it a try anyway. But what's been interesting, particularly in terms of all these attacks and the defenses and so on, is how they've tried to ghostbuster the defense of Mass Effect Andromeda. That is, they keep trying to reframe the attacks that are being made on the game and the franchise and the company as misogyny and all the usual kind of shit they try to defend Ghostbusters with. And it's not really working. And that's heartening and interesting to see. Now, a mistake on the part of the Ralph retort and one of their researchers, who's usually pretty good, seems to have exacerbated this by going after the wrong person. But the majority of the complaints are towards these two people who I'm not going to name in case people go and harass them. You can find out for yourself. But there was a virulently anti-white racist involved, and there was this absurd woman who thinks you can get raped in computer games. That's where most of the ire of the former Gamergate people, the veterans of the meme wars, those are the people that the ire has been directed at, and things like the animations and so on. If there's a good story, I don't care about that stuff. Plenty of other people do, and they're entitled to. The point is, the criticisms are not coming from a place of misogyny or bigotry or whatever else, but are rather quite the opposite. And Mass Effect Andromeda, at least from the previews and what people are saying is going on, seems to legitimize people's concerns about crowbarring in certain concepts and so forth. So there's that. But anyway, it doesn't seem to be working, and that's a good thing to see. Maybe that tactic won't be employed quite so much in the future. We can hope. Zang.
Grim gave a big yawn and settled down to sleep. And of course, when Grim goes to sleep, all of his friends go to sleep too. The people on the internet were just text on a screen, the collectibles were just cheap plastic tat, and the books were just elaborate sandwiches made of wood and paper. Even Grim himself, once he was asleep, was just an old saggy goth twat, baggy and a bit loose at the seams, and nobody loved him.
It's all done in the best possible taste!